This is Writer's Voices with Monica and Caroline. I'm your host, Monica Hadley, and with me is my mother and co-host, Caroline Kilborn.
And good afternoon on this beautiful sunshine day.
Yeah, we haven't had winter yet, but I understand that it's not going to last.
Well, probably not, but I can dream.
I have a feeling it's going to be a mild winter.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I don't mind. I don't mind the cold, but it's the shoveling of the snow and stuff, and my driveway is a bad one. Other than that, I'm good. Yeah.
So, what do we have today, Mom?
Today we have an interesting book, and it's Women and the Land, and it's written by Barb Hall, and the photography by Catherine Gamble. The pictures are gorgeous of Iowa. This is Iowa at its best, right here. Barbara Hall is a native Iowan and has never lived on a farm, but has driven past hundreds of them, blissfully unaware about who owned the land or what they were doing with it. Barbara has been writing stories since approximately the age of 10 and holds a journalism degree from Iowa State University. A former editor of Better Homes and Gardens magazine and other publications of Meredith Corporation, she has also worked in newspaper, advertising, and public relations. And this is her first book, and I would say it's a magnificent book.
And Women in the Land is published by Ice Cube Press out of North Liberty, and it's a beautiful, beautiful book.
It is. It really is. Well, Ice Cube Press they do fantastic
They
work.
do. Welcome to Writer's Voices, Barb.
Thank you.
All right. I got you a little loud, so the mic's a little close. Hold on a second. Okay. So tell us how this book came to be.
Well, Catherine Gamble, the photographer, and I we're good friends, and we met 25 years ago or so when I was an editor at Meredith, and she was a photographer doing freelance work for the magazines I was working on. And we had always kind of talked about doing something together and just hadn't made it work. She's very, very busy now as a commercial photographer and has a young family. And about 5 or 6 years ago, she heard something on Iowa Public Radio that stated that more than 50% of the farmland in Iowa is owned by women. And she was intrigued by that, not so much about the statistic, but she wanted to know. She's a documentary photographer at heart, and she was just curious. She wanted to know who these women were and what they were doing and how they got there and why and all these things. And she was frankly just visualizing really great pictures of women on tractors, and that she thought they would make a really great documentary project. And she was right. And she asked me if I would be interested in working on that with her, and I said yes, because I knew it would be beautiful knowing her work. So we dug into it and started. Our first contact was to Women's Farm and Agriculture Network, WFAN, and got some names from them, and it just kind of snowballed from there. It was not hard to find women who are in some way connected to the land. There are many, many different ways that women come to it, and every one of these stories is unique. But like I said, we just kind of dug into it, not knowing exactly what it was going to be. We didn't know when we started that it was going to be a book. The first thing we did was we interviewed 4 or 5 of the women and photographed them and pitched the story to the Iowan magazine, and they jumped right on it, and it did run in the Iowan in, I believe, 2014 in the fall. But we knew it was, we didn't want to quit with just that. We knew it was bigger, and we kept finding out about more and more women, so we just kept going. And then maybe about 2 years ago, we realized that we had a book here and started thinking about it as a book, as a contained project. And from there, we just wanted to make sure we were representing the state geographically pretty well, and also representing different genres of farming, pigs, cows, corn. And making sure we just had a good variety of stories. And then there's a lot of wind farms in Iowa. Should we find a wind farmer? Yes, we should do that. And I read about a cricket farmer. Should we do a cricket farmer? Yes.
Oh, I love that story.
And a buffalo farmer. And
buffalo farmer. Yeah.
So so you ended up with 20
about a year ago. Go ahead.
You ended up with 25 women that you profile?
26.
26. Okay.
And some of the chapters are 2 or 3 women in one story. So there aren't 26 stories, but there are 26 women.
Oh,
okay.
yes, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many of those would you say are traditional farmers, like what we think of with the
conventional
farming
is what they like to call it?
Right.
I would say maybe a 25% to 30% of them are farming conventionally, or at least they started that way and are maybe swinging a little bit to less conventional methods.
And
not all of them are actually farming it. Some of them just own it and are making decisions about it, but are not driving the tractors and
right. And when they say 50% of the farmland is owned by women, is that including? Are they counting if it's jointly owned? Are they including all of that, or are they including half of it if it's jointly owned?
The figure that we found, which was 3 or 4 years old now and came out of Iowa State, was that more than 51% of the land has at least one female owner.
Okay.
In conjunction with a husband or whatever. And then the statistic was more like 30% of the land is owned solely by a woman, which is still pretty high. When you imagine a farmer in Iowa, you don't think of a woman.
That's right.
30% is pretty high, and it's growing all the time. And a lot of the people that we've talked to who know about these things say that figure is really probably pretty low, just because of the way that farms are registered, and a lot of the times, even after the patriarch of the family has died, the land might not be in his daughter's name, even though she's the one that owns it. So it's probably not a completely accurate statistic. And we weren't really that interested in the statistic. We were just more interested in telling these stories.
Uh-huh.
Well, Caroline's part of that statistic too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I own some land in Davis County, and so 208 acres, 100 acres of trees. And
wow, a tree farmer. We didn't cover trees.
Yeah,
The next book you should cover trees.
We'll give you a call.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Well, the tree, of course, it's in forest preserve, which really helps. And but they are gorgeous trees, and so every few years, of course, we harvest some of them, and that ash borer was a problem.
Oh boy!
Yeah, it's like the Dutch elm disease back in the 60s. Yeah. Just decimated the elm trees, and it's really sad.
It is the new Dutch elm.
Yep.
It seems like for a long time women did do a lot of the work around on the farm. Maybe they weren't necessarily out feeding the hogs every day, but they were during harvest time. They were out driving the tractor. They kept the books. They, organized things.
They were employed full time as a farmer, but they were called the farm wife.
Right, and they didn't get much credit for it. Our tax system doesn't give them credit for them. The Social Security system didn't give them much credit for it.
Right.
Yeah. So it's nice to...
One of the women that we featured, Mary Garst, who we were fortunate enough to interview and photograph about 6 months before she died. We're just so glad we met her. But she, this was back in the 70s, I believe. She was a farm wife. She was not a typical farm wife, as you'll read if you read her chapter, but she asked her husband to pay her.
Oh.
Very revolutionary. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I noticed a lot of younger women in your stories, and of course, farm machinery has gotten so much more sophisticated now than it was before, and I think probably easier to manipulate, perhaps, than it would have been back in the day, and that probably made a big difference too. I know tractors are something else, and
yeah.
So, how did you decide, out of all these women farmers or women of the land in Iowa, how did you decide which ones? And did you interview more than you actually ended up including in the book?
We did not interview more than we included. We didn't. We did a little bit of research on them and determined, once we found out about them, that we did want to spend the time and put them in the project. There were a few that we contacted that weren't interested. We just couldn't get them interested. Mostly because of time constraints, and that was most of that was pretty early on, and we didn't have any cred. We were two ladies from Des Moines, and we're going to come out and take pictures of you and take up your valuable time. They just weren't interested in that. But once we had the Iowan article done, then we would send that out. When we were trying to recruit somebody new, we would send that to give us just a little street cred that, yes, this is a project, we're continuing with it, we'd like you to be a part of it. And we did have one woman turn us down after we sent that to her because she detected a tone there that we were anti-conventional farming, and we really, really weren't and aren't. The theme kind of emerged, surprisingly to us, that women do seem to be taking better care of the land than their predecessors. They do seem to be a little more concerned and aware of the fact that we're growing food here, folks, and we need to be making sure that it's healthy and making sure that we leave a good legacy for our children. And I keep saying this isn't good research. It's not even good journalism. We didn't go out and interview men and compare them to women. So it may be just that everyone today is taking better care of the land. That is quite possible. But these women care very deeply about the land and about what's grown on it.
You're listening to Writers' Voices with Monica and Caroline, and our guest today is Barbara Hall, author of Women and the Land, which features Iowa farm women.
And it would make a very nice Christmas gift.
It would.
By the way.
It would. Now, tell us, Barbara, how you got connected with Ice Cube Press.
Once we determined that it was a book, we kind of felt, both of us have been around the publishing world long enough to know that it's really hard to get a book published. And we really thought it was going to be a self-published venture, and we started looking into that. And then the woman that designed the book for us, Jolene Rivera, said, this is going to be so good. You guys should at least try to find a publisher. So we started shopping around a little bit, and Steve Semken at Ice Cube Press was recommended to us by several people. And we pitched it to 3 or 4 different people, and a couple were interested and the others weren't. And we went with Steve just because of the, things that we liked about him and Ice Cube Press.
Well, one thing is that he focuses on books of the Midwest and,
right.
That have a sense of place, which obviously where place is an important part of the book, actually.
Yeah, yes, that was one of the things that really attracted us to him and his business.
Right. So tell us a little bit about the process of doing this. Did you, you'd interview someone, would you complete that essay before you would move on to the next one? Or did you have all these notes from interviews and then you sat down and started writing, or?
Kind of both. Catherine's schedule is very, very, very busy. I'm busy, but not as busy as she is. And so trying to schedule her time was the biggest challenge. And I would initiate the contact with the farmer and ask if it was, if we could come out and set up a photo shoot and an interview. We both went. Generally, we went together and took the pictures and did the interview, all in one fell swoop, so we wouldn't have to take up too much of the woman's time. And also because we are good friends and we enjoy being together. So there were times when we'd schedule 3 or 4 in a couple days, in one part of the state, and we'd maybe stay overnight. Or I don't know if we ever did 2 in one day, but we might have done. There might have been a couple where we did 2 in one day. But we would. I would find out as much as I could ahead of time, so I could ask intelligent questions. And some of them have a lot of stuff about them written already, like Denise O'Brien. There's a wealth of information about her. There's a wealth of information about the Garst family. So I didn't have to do all that, ask them all those background questions. But we would go there together, and generally while Catherine was scoping out the farm and finding a perfect spot for a good photograph, I would be sitting there with my notebook with the farmer and asking her some questions, and that was kind of a start. And then I just tagged along while we got the photographs, and often I was having to be the assistant to Catherine too and hold the lights or whatever. But I would keep talking and keep asking questions, and as many good journalists will know, the best stuff comes out sometimes after when the notebook comes put down. So I would try to remember what they said if I wasn't holding the notebook. But in a couple cases, I would have to follow up with a phone call or to just clarify some details. And I also made sure that I sent each woman the chapter about her, because this has been a more than 5 year process. And some of the details changed, and I couldn't go back and rewrite every single one of them, the ones that we had been to 5 years ago, but I could update some things. And so it was just kind of a process.
Wow.
Okay, the one that was really...
And once we had about 15, then we took a look to see where our gaps were, and we realized, we don't have any cows. We got to find some cows. So we, contacted people we knew to see, do you know any women that are dairy farmers? And then that's when, the cricket thing came up, and a couple other things kind of came up at the last minute. There were a few others that were recommended to us once people knew that we were doing this, and a lot of the ones that we just weren't interested in probably would have made great stories, but they were kind of redundant to some of the things we'd already did, and we didn't feel the need for a lot of redundancy.
Okay, the one that I was really intrigued was the cricket farmer.
Yeah, the crickets.
Yeah, because that's really unusual. Really unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, can you tell us how you stumbled upon that one?
Well, yeah, it was kind of an accident. My full-time job, my day job, the one that pays, a few years ago I was part of a statewide organization that helps innovative businesses or startup businesses get funding, and Becky Herman had applied to get some funding from the state for her entrepreneurial venture, and I was at this an event where she was pitching her business to win some prize money, and I listened to the pitch, and it was really fascinating and interesting, and she was adorable, so I knew she would be a great addition to the book. So I think I took some pictures of her on my phone and sent them to Catherine and said, "What do you think?" And of course, we got to do cricket farming.
Yeah, I can't imagine how loud that barn must be where she grows them.
Not loud at all. They're not your black crickets that make noise. They're if you look at the pictures, there's little brown insects, and so I don't know that much about crickets to know which ones make noise and which don't. But it was completely quiet, and it's not even a barn. It's a building that's a former restaurant, and it's not very big. But they have these Rubbermaid bins stacked on shelves that are 3 or 4 bins high, and it's very quiet and clean. And
well, I know that crickets are great protein, but
yeah,
I just can't get over the ick factor.
Well, yeah, but they grind them up.
When I first met her and saw her presentation, she had some samples, and this was before she even had. I don't think she'd even started yet. I can't remember, but she had a sample, a bag that looked like a bag of chips, and she was carrying it around at this presentation, and so she invited me to try some, and I reached my hand in and grabbed a handful, because I'd watched her eat them, and I could see that she ate them, so they must be okay. And I think if I wouldn't have looked at them before I put them in my mouth, I would have been completely okay. Did, and they had eyes and antennae and ugh.
Oh no!
But they didn't. Yeah, they didn't taste bad at all. But generally, most of the crickets are ground up and used in cricket flour that are used in protein bars and things like that. Yeah. You don't.
You don't see the antenna.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, it would be hard to eat that. But in a lot of cultures in the world, bugs is standard fare.
Well, what?
I think the thing that was surprising to me about the cricket farming is the sustainability part of it. And I'm not going to remember the statistics, but they take so much fewer resources to grow the same amount of protein as a cow.
Well,
so an equal amount of protein from a hamburger the hamburger takes so many more resources to produce that.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's kind of true with all of our
and soil
food.
And all sorts of stuff.
The energy that goes into producing food, that particularly that's being grown and shipped from far away, far exceeds the caloric energy that we get from the food, and that's there really is. I'm associated with a group here in Fairfield called the Sustainable Living Coalition, and we're promoting local food sources. And that does seem to be a theme that has emerged from this is, we've got wonderful land here, but almost all the food we eat is being shipped in.
Yeah, 80% is one statistic.
Right. And so farmers are looking at that and saying, hey, maybe there's some opportunity here.
Yeah, and another statistic I heard was that if every county in Iowa would put aside 10 acres of land to grow food on, we could feed our entire state 100%. 10 acres.
10 acres?
That's not very.
Are you sure about that?
I'm not. That's something that was quoted to me, and I'm not sure about that. But it was somebody who knows what she's talking about.
Wow.
Who said that?
Wow. The problem is that we're also used to eating all things all the time. And if you're relying on local food production, you can only eat what's in season, fresh.
But we grew up doing that, and I still feel weird eating strawberries in the winter, and I still feel weird eating watermelon in the winter. I want to eat food when it's in season. And people that are younger than us, I don't think care about that so much.
So, Barb, why don't you read from Women in the Land for us? Women and the Land.
Yeah, I'm going to read the chapter about Liz Garst, who's in Guthrie County. Fresh from a prairie bird and clad in bright yellow fire gear, Liz Garst climbs out of a gator in the parking lot of the Burr Oak Visitor Center near Coon Rapids. With a sweeping gesture of her left hand, she points out the 5,000-plus acre White Rock Conservancy, a land trust donated by the Garst family. With a sweep of her other arm, she points toward the famous Garst Farm, site of the 1959 visit by Nikita Khrushchev. The granddaughter of Khrushchev's host, Roswell and Elizabeth Garst, Liz credits her mother with bearing the standard for Iowa women in agriculture. And then I make a reference to the chapter about Mary Garst, her mother. Liz Garst followed in her mother's footsteps and then put on bigger boots. She holds a degree in English literature from Stanford, a master's in agriculture economics from Michigan State, and a master's in business from Harvard. There have always been women landowners, but women are starting to better understand that if they own it, they control it, Liz says. In 1990, she told the Iowa division of a United Nations Association conference that while more than 50% of the land in Iowa is owned by women, they don't act like they own it. Increasingly, she believes, that control involves an emphasis on conservation. When she was 16 years old, her grandfather bought a farm for all 15 Garst cousins to manage. We took all the profits and invested in building terraces, she says. Her ancestors have been terracing their land for generations, and Liz believes it's the most effective method for preventing erosion. Her father was an early adopter of no-till farming and other basic sustainable ag practices. To those, Liz has added planting cover crops such as tillage, radishes, and rye. No-till stops erosion but doesn't build the soil, she explains as she pulls a radish from her garden near her farmhouse. Cover crops do both, adding carbon to the soil and fixing the nitrogen. With the right balance of cover crops, you can cut commercial fertilizer and increase your yield. Liz is also involved in conservation on the state level as a member of the Iowa Environmental Council Board of Directors and also on the board of White Rock Conservancy. White Rock is open to the public for a number of recreational activities, including hiking, horseback riding, mountain biking, and canoeing. The Conservancy also sponsors conservation projects like timber stand improvement, prescribed burns, cover crop research, and prairie strips in crop fields. Mm-hmm. Getting people here is part of our mission, Liz says about White Rock. We want people to learn about conservation. Environmentalists don't like cows. Farmers don't like people looking at their cows. We set this up so people can look at cows and prairie and learn about the land they live on. I think the more we know about it, the more likely we are to care for it.
Oh, amen, that's for sure.
And that was Barbara Hall reading from Women and the Land. which is a beautiful book.
And it is. It
I don't know. It's just really interesting to me all the different ways that women have come to farming. Some married into it, some inherited it, some and some came to it totally independently.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by the number of women that we interviewed anyway who grew up on a farm, moved away, saying, "Go, I'm out of here. I'm never coming back," and then have come back.
Yeah. I think
exactly
there's a couple. I can think of at least one woman that I went to high school with who stayed here and took over the family farm and really, did everything. She did it all.
Another thing I like about this book is there's a lot of quotes from people in it.
Ah, yes. Yeah. How did you pick the quotes?
I started Googling quotes. I used some keywords and found some things, and then tried to match the quote with the tone, with the woman.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. For example, I'm flipping through here. For Jan Libby, who's up near Clear Lake, something from Vedana Shiva. We are either going to have a future where women lead the way to make peace with the earth, or we are not going to have a human future at all. I did 2 or 3 from A Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, including the one on Susan Aram's chapter where she's talking about growing earth and about these kids that are coming to her farm to do internships, and they just want to touch the earth. And the quote is, "Might I," quavered Mary, "might I have a bit of earth?"
So, Barb, you must be really pleased with how the book turned out.
Oh, I am. I'm very pleased and proud. But I'm not surprised. I know Catherine's work, and I knew it was going to be beautiful. And as I talked to each woman, I knew that it was going to be interesting. So I'm not surprised that it's good. I am kind of surprised at how well it's being received. I'm surprised and overwhelmed and humbled. It's just we've struck a chord, I guess, and
yes.
I'm surprised by that.
Do you think there'll be volume 2?
I don't know. We're talking about doing something. I don't know if it'll be women or women farmers or something completely different. But we definitely would like to do another project together.
Well, that sounds like a great idea, and I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we've been talking with Barb Hall, author of Women in the Land. You can certainly check out Ice Cube Press website, order it from there or from any independent bookstore, or of course your normal Amazons and Barnes and Nobles too. And now see you next week on Writers' Voices.